All right, looks like we are live. Thank you guys for attending. I'm going to get this started right now. Welcome to Quiz Machinery. My name is Jason Dingus, and I'm the owner of Quiz Machinery. Have been since I bought the business from Frank Quiz Jr. in 2017. He bought the business from his father in 1981, and Frank Quiz Sr. started the business in 1956. So we've been serving the woodworking industry for 64 years now. Today we're going to be talking about your rough mill and specifically optimizing your rip and chop systems and how that can get you more yield on your lumber as well as more production out of your labor. A lot of times these systems can pay for themselves in less than 2 years. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then hopefully we can get to a point where you guys can put some questions in and I can get to some answers at the end. Just go ahead and put those in as soon as you have them, and we'll get to the questions at the end. Again, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the agenda here real quick. Well, first we're going to talk about rip first versus chop first, and chop first versus rip first, and how you can do either of those on the Cameron automation system that we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to talk specifically about the rip system, and then we're going to go to the quick chop, which is their optimizing chop saw. And then we're going to move on to some specifics about the whole system, how it can save you labor, the software that goes into that, and how it's written up right up there in Poughkeepsie, New York, where their facility is located. Then we're going to talk about how to calculate your ROI and the different variables there. We'll talk about opportunities for you all to send us your parts, send us your cut list, and we can get you a specific number on what that payback's going to be for you and your shop. And then we're going to have a Q&A. So again, I'm going to encourage you to ask those questions as soon as you have them. Put them right there in the chat, the questions box there. And thank you guys for spending your time with us. So let's dig right in. So first we're going to talk about rip first versus chop first, or chop first versus rip first. This is a question I get a lot. A lot of you are probably still chopping your wood first and ripping it second, and that is okay. This system, just to give you a heads up, this system can work either way. We have customers using it chopping first, we have customers using it ripping first. Let's talk a little bit about why they're doing which. Many of our customers started out in the furniture industry, so let's talk about how they got there. They were using a straight line rip and an optimized chop saw, some type of, not an optimized chop saw, but a traditional chop saw, some kind of a sliding saw, and you all know this universal sign of what they're doing there. The lumber's big, right? So it was much easier to handle it going through the straight line rip, because you have to send it back through several times if we chop it down first. So that's what they would do. They would chop it into something close to what they needed. If they needed 30 inches, they would cut it down to 32, and then they would send it through that straight line rip, so they don't have to they don't have as much bow in the wood. It's shorter, so we don't have as much bow. There were some advantages there. And then when you think about having to send that back through, now we have a smaller part to send back through, so it's easier for one or two guys to do that. Now, flash forward to today, the technology is available that you could do it the other way. We can run the entire board through, rip it down into a few different widths, and then on a gang rip saw, hopefully with an optimizing infeed system, and we rip that down into smaller widths, and then we take those parts down to the chop, and it can be a much more efficient system, because most customers have less widths that they're cutting to and more lengths that they're cutting to. If you think about it, a 12-foot long board, you have a lot of different variations of lengths that you can cut that to, versus an 8-inch wide board. You only have so many different widths that you can cut that to. Most customers have standardized widths as far as their crest rails, as far as their arms, as far as their legs. So those dimensions being limited, the widths, and then the variation came in the chop. And that's why a lot of them have moved to that. It's a good general to go by. So here we're going to show you guys a couple of just a couple quick examples of the cut list. In this first case, you have a few different chop lengths that we're cutting to, and a whole bunch of different widths, specific widths that we're cutting to. In this case, it'd be smarter to chop first, because we're chopping everything to those few lengths, and then we run through the variations on the rip saw. In the other case, we have just a few different widths that we're cutting to. We've got standardized parts, and now we're going to chop second. So another way to think about that is a lot of customers have moved to buying dimensioned lumber. They're buying it based on a few different widths. That is, in essence, ripping first, chopping second, because they're bringing the wood in at 2 1/4 or 3 1/4, and then they're going to cut it to the lengths that they need. So hopefully you guys are getting that. If you have any questions about that, please again put them in the chat. Moving on. Let's talk specifically about the Cameron Automation rip systems. First, quickly, they have a 12-inch saw as well as an 18-inch saw, each available for the 4 different infeed systems, that would be the Skew saw, Skew infeed system, which we're going to talk about today, then the Quick Rip, then the Auto Opti Rip, and then the Rip 1. If you have questions about those, please put those into your chat and we will get to you specifically about those. But today we're going to talk about the Skew because we just finished a case study, ROI study for a customer of ours, and who was moving from straight line rip with a chop saw like this to a more automated system. Let's talk about the Skew fence specifically. So in my shop, in my woodworking shop, if we got a 12-foot long board that had a 2-foot long dog leg at the end, we would need to chop those 2 feet off at the end so we can get the most yield out of those last 10 feet. Okay, and if you have a Skew Cameron Automation Skew rip system, you don't have to do that. The Skew fence is going to adjust itself to get the most out of that 10 to 11 feet that it can to get the most yield. So that's a great little advantage right there. That's a proprietary technology that Cameron Automation has, and that comes on a couple of different saws, a couple of different infeed systems, and we could talk to you a little bit more about that in detail. Let's talk about cutting to yield versus cutting to value. So in each of those systems, each of those examples I was talking about, we're trying to maximize the yield out of the board, getting the most out of it. But what if you just wanted to maximize the value out of the board? So what if the saw noticed, hey, I can get the most yield by cutting a bunch of 2 1/4 inch wide boards. But if you've created a value for a 3 1/4 inch wide board that's greater than that 2 1/4 inch wide board, then the saw is going to figure out he wants to cut to value, so I'm going to put some more of these 3 1/4 inch wide boards, even if it reduces my yield. Then let's talk a little bit about the safety of this saw. In traditional straight line rip as well as gang rip systems, the operator is standing behind the machine, infeeding the saw, and the saw is cutting towards that individual. In this system, we've taken the operator and placed them next to the saw. They're putting the board in. As the board goes across to get behind that saw, it's doing it automatically, and that's where the sensors are reading that board and determining a good image of the board, which you will end up with, and you'll be able to determine from there what cut solution, the operator will be able to determine what cut solution they want to use for this particular board. If they see a defect, which this particular saw will not see, that would be the Rip 1, then they can adjust the cut solution accordingly and still notice what's going to happen to the yield when they do so. So that's a little bit about the Skew Rip system. There's a whole lot more I'd like to dig into. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of this presentation. So now let's talk a little bit about the Cameron Automation Quick Chop, which is an optimizing chop saw. It's an optimizing infeed with software written in Poughkeepsie, New York, with a 7.5 or 10 horsepower saw at the end of it doing that upcut saw. And we've got a cage around it to protect your operators, create a safer environment. We've also moved the operator further away from the saw in the revision that just happened a few years ago that we launched at the IWF in 2018. So let's talk a little bit about the saw and some of the additional features that my customers love. One is there's a width sensor, so you can put up their random width wood and it's going to pull from the width that's appropriate for those parts from that cut list. And then as well, another feature my customers love is the grade sorting. So within a 12-foot long board, I might have a 4-foot section that I would consider to be select, and I can move that to the parts or a particular chair or piece of furniture or millwork that I know I need that select wood, and I can mark it such for the saw. The saw will see that mark and know, let me pull this wood from the select if anything will fit within that. If it doesn't, it goes to its other wood and the other cut list, and it pulls from those parts. So moving on. So let's talk about the outfeed. So we've cut the wood. We can cut up to 4 inches thick or up to 15 inches wide, depending on the arbor location you choose. And then we're going to print on the parts afterwards. The high-speed printer is going to print part number, length, name, random, whatever you want to do, if it's going to help for your inventory and your sorting or help for your assembly, whatever that might be. And then we're going to put one of 3 different outfeed systems at the end. Most of my customers still prefer just a table for the parts to land on. Some have moved on to the conveyor, which is picking up a lot of popularity. A conveyor which brings the boards out perpendicular to the direction of the saw. And then the other, then going in line with the saw, is a kicker station, which we can add as well. We've been referencing a couple of case studies. I'm going to go over one of them really quickly here. This is Bob's Millwork, which we like to use as an alias to protect the innocent and the guilty of our customers, and how they're currently doing things and how our systems might be able to help them out. Again, reach out to us, because I'd like to do one specifically for you. We have a lot of systems that make that quick and easy, and you're going to share, you're going to see all the data for yourselves. It's going to be your data, so it's really the most effective way for us to tell you how long it will take you to pay off this system. Looking specifically at Bob's Millwork, what we do is we take into effect the material cost, how much he's spending on lumber per year, and then what his current yield is. And we help you determine those numbers. I know a lot of you are going to say, I have no way of knowing what my yield is, except I know I brought in this and I sent out that. That's certainly one down and dirty way to do it, but there are a little bit more effective ways to do it to get a better number out of that and what you're wasting on lumber as well as labor. Then we move on to the rough mill analysis, what a common job looks like at your place, how many people that's taking to do, and then we're going to look at the total cost of the solution that we're going to provide for you. We're going to run a simulation. We've done this for Bob's Millwork here. We're going to run that up in Poughkeepsie, New York. We're going to get video of it, which you've seen some of that video for one of our customers here today. And then we're going to share those results with you. And a lot of times you come back and say, hey, I forgot this component to it, or I forgot this, and we can add that in later. And then we're going to determine the labor savings, the yield savings, put all these things together, the cost of wood, which is going up, we all know that, and then the cost of labor is going up. And then we're going to get you that ROI calculation. Is this going to be able to pay itself off in 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, 5 years, whatever is important to you. So thank you for taking the time to learn this from us today, and we look forward to doing a project specifically for you. Thank you all for attending, and I want to go over a couple quick questions that I get a lot of times. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in, and Allie, our CEO, is standing by to wave at me when there's a question. First I want to do is thank you guys real quick for attending IWF Connect as a whole. Really important to the industry that we show this technology, that we all advance it. So just quick thanks on that before I forget. And then also before I forget, remember, check out our new website, www.quizmachinery.com, and built by Dan Costin. Great site. Check it out. Lots of value there. A couple questions I get on the infeed systems and the chop. How do we do that ROI? That is depending on what level you need. Most of my manufacturers, most of my best customers require us to provide some type of an ROI payback. So what are they getting in terms of if I spend this $300,000 on this full system, how long is that going to take me to pay back? And we go through a lot of details, how much you're spending on lumber, what type species of lumber, how many employees are dedicated to the job. And then we take that, we create a simulation with our same software. So you're going to get the exact same information, real accurate information, And then we can do that and tell you how many people it's going to take to do it our way, and what kind of yield you can expect. Then therefore we take that savings and we apply that into the total system. I'm getting ready to sneeze. Then rough lumber, reclaimed lumber, that's a question I get a lot. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can run reclaimed lumber. Talk to us more about that. Let us see yours to be sure. As well, we can stick our infeed system on another brand's gang rip saw, but that is an asterisk next to that. Please check with us to make sure it's not just any saw, and there's some questions there that need to be answered. Thank you guys again for attending. And thanks for attending IWF Connect. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show and have a great weekend. Again, check out our website, www.quizmachinery.com. That's QUIS machinery.com. And my name is Jason Dingus, and thanks again.